All right, let's get right into it. Today we're going to tackle one of biology's biggest questions. Why do you look the way you do? Why do you have your dad's nose or your mom's smile? It all comes down to this incredible mystery of heredity. And today, we are cracking the code.
I mean, it seems super obvious, right? An elephant has a baby elephant. A mango seed grows into a mango tree. But have you ever stopped to really think about why? This simple, almost childlike question is actually the launchpad for the entire field of genetics. It's the key to understanding why we look like our parents, but also why we're all still so unique.
And that whole process has a name, of course. It's called inheritance. You can think of it like this. If your family's history is a story, inheritance is the actual language that story is written in. It's the biological mechanism that passes on those characters, or traits, from one generation to the next.
Okay, but here's the other side of that coin. Variation. This is the really cool part. It's the reason you're not just a carbon copy of your parents. Variation is all about the differences between parents and their kids. So inheritance makes things similar, but variation, that's what makes every single one of us completely unique.
So, if this is a mystery, who was the first detective on the scene? Well, his name was Gregor Mendel. We're talking the mid-1800s here. This guy, a monk, launches this incredibly meticulous, 7-year-long investigation that basically becomes the foundation for everything we know about genetics today.
And listen, this was not some quick aha moment. We're talking 7 years of patient, painstaking work with pea plants. He publishes his findings in 1865, but here's the kicker. Nobody gets it. His work was so revolutionary, so ahead of its time, that it was pretty much ignored for 35 years. It wasn't until 1900 that other scientists rediscovered it and realized what a genius this guy was. The real genius of Mendel wasn't just his patience. It was his method. This was so clever. He didn't just mix any old plants together. He started with what are called true breeding lines, so he knew exactly what he was working with. Then he systematically crossed them, tracked their kids, and here's the part that was totally unheard of for biology back then. He counted everything. He used math and statistics to find the patterns hidden in the numbers, a total game changer.
And these were his clues. Instead of getting overwhelmed trying to track everything at once, he was super smart about it. He picked just 7 characteristics that had really clear either-or options. The plant was tall or dwarf. The seed was round or wrinkled. There were no kinda tall or sorta wrinkly options. This black and white approach was absolutely the key that let him see the patterns everyone else was missing.
All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. Let's look at the experiment that really started it all. It's called the Monohybrid Cross. That just means he was tracking a single trait at a time. And for our example, we're going to look at stem height. What happens when you cross a tall pea plant with a dwarf one?
Okay, so here's the setup. He takes his true breeding parents. One is pure tall. We'll use 2 big T's to represent that. The other is pure dwarf. So 2 little t's. Then he very carefully cross-pollinates them to see what their babies will look like. And boom, here's the first major surprise. Every single one of the offspring, what we call the F1 generation, was tall. 100%. The dwarf trait, it just vanished. Poof, gone. Now this completely contradicted the popular idea at the time, which was that traits just blended together, like mixing red and white paint to get pink.
So you can just imagine Mendel scratching his head, right? Where did the dwarfness go? Was it gone forever? He had a hunch that it couldn't have just disappeared into thin air. He knew it had to be hiding in there somewhere. So, naturally, he took the experiment one step further. So, what he did next was let those tall F1 plants self-pollinate. And to figure out what might happen, we can use this awesome little tool called a Punnett square. It's basically a probability grid. You put the possible gene versions, or alleles, from one parent on top, a big T and a little t, and the same from the other parent down the side. The boxes in the middle show you every single possible genetic combo for the kids. And the results were just incredible. In this next generation, the dwarf trait came back, and it wasn't random at all. There was a clear, predictable mathematical pattern. For every 3 tall plants that grew, there was 1 dwarf plant. Time after time, he got this same 3-to-1 ratio. This was huge. But Mendel, being the genius he was, knew that what you see on the outside, the phenotype, was only part of the story. He figured out that the underlying genetic code, the genotype, showed an even more precise pattern. It broke down like this.
1 part was pure tall, TT, 2 parts were hybrid tall, TT, and 1 part was pure dwarf, TT. A perfect 1 to 2 to 1 ratio. That was the hidden code he was looking for.
And this is where Mendel made a truly incredible mental leap. He said, okay, something is being passed down from parent to child, and it's being passed down in discrete, stable little packets. He couldn't see them, he didn't know what they were made of, so he just called them factors. Today, of course, we know them as genes.
And he figured out that these factors, or genes, can come in different versions. We call these versions alleles. So, for the gene that controls plant height, the T for tall is one allele, and the T for dwarf is the other allele. It's kind of like having a gene for eye color, where brown is one allele and blue is another. Same gene, different flavors.
Okay, so all this led him to his first major conclusion, which we call the law of dominance. It basically has 3 parts. First, traits are controlled by these factors, or genes. Second, these factors come in pairs. And third, if you have a mismatched pair, one factor, the dominant one, hides or masks the effect of the other one, the recessive one. And that's why all those first-generation plants were tall, even though they were carrying the dwarf factor.
And his second big idea, the law of segregation, explains how that dwarf trait made its comeback. This law says that the 2 alleles for a trait don't blend or mix. They stay completely separate. And when it's time to make reproductive cells, or gametes, those 2 alleles get segregated or separated so that each gamete only gets 1 copy. This is what gives that recessive allele a chance to pop back up and be seen in the next generation.
So now we're moving on to the next chapter in this incredible detective story. Mendel had laid out all the rules of the game, right? But for decades, nobody had a clue what these factors actually were on a physical level. What were they made of?
And honestly, that lack of physical proof is a big part of why his work was just lost for 35 years. Think about it. His ideas were totally radical for the time. He was using math and biology, which was weird to people. And most importantly, he couldn't just point to something under a microscope and say, "See that thing? That's a factor."
But that all changed right around the turn of the 20th century. Microscopes were getting better, and scientists like Walter Sutton and Theodore Boveri were literally watching cells divide. And as they watched these little thread-like things called chromosomes move around during reproduction, they saw something that looked astoundingly familiar. Their movement perfectly mirrored the behavior of Mendel's imaginary factors.
And this slide right here, this is the smoking gun. It's the moment it all clicked. Mendel said his factors come in pairs. Well, so do chromosomes. Mendel said his factors segregate when gametes are formed. Guess what? So do chromosomes. This parallel behavior was the physical evidence everyone had been missing. It was the bridge that connected Mendel's abstract laws of inheritance to the physical reality of cell biology. This became the chromosomal theory of inheritance.
So, once Mendel's work was finally proven and understood, it became clear this was never just about peas. This was the absolute foundation, the bedrock of all modern genetics. Seriously, every single thing we've discovered since, from the structure of DNA to the power of gene editing, it all stands on the shoulders of the principles that this monk figured out in his garden.
So I want to leave you with this thought. Just think about it. With nothing more than some simple pea plants and his own brilliant logic, Mendel uncovered the fundamental rules of life's code. Fast forward to today, and we have technology that lets us read the entire human genome from A to Z. It just makes you wonder, right? With all that knowledge, what's the next great puzzle we're going to solve?